ESPO's Professional Development Webinar Series. The title of this webinar is Networking, Building Solid Career Connections for Emerging Scholars and Professionals. I'd like to introduce our speakers, Dr. Catherine Hall and Jamie Hughes. Dr. Hall is an assistant professor of geriatrics at Duke University and the Veterans Affairs Medical Centers in Durham, North Carolina. She is a past chair of ESPO's Executive Committee. Jamie Hughes is a doctoral student in social work and public health and an NIH predoctoral research fellow at UNC Chapel Hill. She has worked previously with the Geriatric Research Education and Clinical Center at both the Ann Arbor and Los Angeles VA Medical Centers. She is currently a member of the ESPO Executive Committee and will begin her term as chair in November 2015. There will be time for questions towards the end of the presentation. You can type your questions via your control panel in the question box area. You can also contribute today via our Twitter webinar hashtag, which is #GeroNetworking, also found on the bottom of each of our slides. We will try to answer all questions within the allotted webinar time. However, if any questions do not get answered, we will collect these and they will be answered by our presenters. We will post these on the GSA website along with the slides and link to the recorded presentation in about 1 week. Thank you to our presenters today, and thank you to our audience for their attendance.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Joanna, for that great introduction. So I'm Catherine Hall, and I'm going to be kicking off our presentation today on networking. So I'm thrilled to be here to speak to you all about networking, and I see that people are still continuing to join us as the hour goes on. But Jamie and I are excited to be co-hosting this and have a lot of both experiential and professional opportunities to share with you. We do want this to be an interactive session, though, so I do encourage you to take advantage of Joanna's invitation to submit your questions as we go along, and then we can have a time to address those at the end of the presentation. So please do think about any questions you might have or how this relates to your career stage and opportunities. So I don't really want to spend much time talking about networking and why it's important, because I'm assuming most of you are signing on to this webinar because you recognize its importance and the benefits that it can bring to you both personally and professionally. But I did think it made sense to start off by talking about the two primary forms of networking, or why we really participate in networking. The first is that networking can provide an informational component, so learning about training, career options, expanding your network. So really trying to get more information about different programs. But there's also a professional side to networking, which is clearly of importance to a lot of us on the call here today as we start to transition in our early careers into more professional opportunities. And that's when we try to network and identify individuals to establish collaborative relationships with. And that can be looking for colleagues, for co-authors even, so people in your field who are either at the same career stage or above that would make significant contributions and collaborate on manuscripts. It's also good to have a broad network to identify for things like reviewing your papers. You know, journals more and more are asking us to identify individuals in the field who would be qualified to review papers, and the same goes as grants. So it really is advantageous to start early and continue to cultivate your networks as you go along. So where do we primarily look to establish our networking connections? So the internet is probably the most predominant way now. This used to be kind of termed as passive networking, so aka not face-to-face, but really in this day and age I think that it's actually quite active to be looking at various websites, social media outlets, professional organizations and their internet platforms, and trying to find like-minded people in your field to not only connect with them and start with those relationships, but to also keep track of what they're doing. So you can see when they have new publications come out, when they get a new grant, or when they're posting postdoctoral training opportunities in their lab. It's just a nice way and a dynamic way to keep up with folks and what's going on. So I wanted to pull in a couple of elements of data that we pulled when you signed up for this webinar, and we asked what types of internet-based or social media-based platforms do you all use to network or identify folks to add to your network. And a third of you said you don't use any social media platforms, which is interesting. And full disclosure, probably prior to this talk, I was not actively using many either, but as of a week ago, I added my LinkedIn account, so I'm now officially on there. But there was a good representation of ResearchGate and LinkedIn, and then evenly split between Twitter, Facebook, and Google as kind of the least accessed. So we clearly could improve, all of us, our presence on these social media outlets, and particularly in the professional sphere of ResearchGate and LinkedIn. Unlike these, the Twitter and Facebook tend to be more biased towards social interactions, but a lot is going on in the Twitter space in terms of professional promotion. And one that I didn't poll about, but I feel it behooved me to point out here, is that, of course, GSA has their own networking platform that's supposed to be used to encourage you to collaborate and connect with other aging professionals in the GSA network, and that's GSA Connect. And so I encourage you to check that out as well, and can be really, really useful for establishing those. Now, the one thing I feel that needs to be pointed out at this point really is that it's not enough just to establish connections, right? So if most people are on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you might have a whole host of individuals that follow you or like you on Facebook, but how many of those people do you actively follow up with as opposed to just following their feeds? And the same criticism can go for these professional platforms as well. So when you're on LinkedIn, yes, it's good to have a broad and extensive network on LinkedIn, but if you don't regularly check that or check in with the people on your LinkedIn account and your colleagues that you've connected with, it really has limited access. And so I want to point out for a moment just that it really necessitates reaching out with purpose. So just to provide an example, so this is the connection platform or screen through LinkedIn, and you find someone, you search for a colleague or a collaborator on LinkedIn, and you say, yes, I want to reach out and add them to my LinkedIn network. It allows you to identify how you know this person. Is it a colleague? Is it a classmate? All of these options here. And then it includes this default message of, I'd like to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn. If I was to click send invitation at this point, you would get an email with just this message here: I would like to add you to my professional network. Now, since logging on to LinkedIn a week ago, I've gotten a ton of these requests, all of which have this default solicitation email. And I can tell you that it doesn't really drive you or motivate you to respond or go into LinkedIn and accept. So I'd really encourage you to personalize this and, again, reach out with purpose. So reach out to the person by name. Remind them how they know you. If this is someone you've met at the GSA meeting or connected with on GSA Connect, remind them how you know them, where you are now, and why you're reconnecting. So here's a colleague that I went to graduate school with, reintroducing myself. So, we overlapped in graduate school. I was in Dr. Eddie McCauley's lab years ago. I'm now at Duke University, but I still remember my days at University of Illinois fondly. So it makes that connection and helps them see, oh yes, this is someone who's relevant, I remember her, and hopefully I want to reestablish this connection. So reaching out with purpose is definitely imperative, not only on internet but also in person. So the other thing to remember is that these social networking sites and internet-based applications can be a great way to identify people ahead of time and kind of establish a rapport online. So I view this as kind of a first step in terms of breaking the ice, and then once you get to meet them in person, you already have a rapport established. So back in the day, I never was really good at networking in person. I found it quite intimidating, so I tended to use this outlet as a way to make myself feel more comfortable. We already had something in common. We'd already talked about our professional overlap and consistencies, and by the time I met them at the annual meeting, it felt like we were already had established that collaborative relationship. So you just pick up where you left off, so the groundwork is set once you actually see them in person. Another option too to do that and also get a second benefit in terms of professional opportunities is to volunteer or take advantage of kind of mentor-mentee partnerships that various audiences have set up. So the one that I highlight here is the Reviewer and Training Program, and I highlight the gerontologist, so one of the GSA's journals that offers a reviewer and training program. I'm not going to speak too much about this because you all hear about this at the annual meeting, but in a nutshell, it pairs up more junior level and student scientists with more senior level researchers to co-review a paper and a manuscript. So you can learn from senior scientists about what they look for, how they critique, how they draft a critique. But you think about that also then forms a nice close collaborative relationship between you as the junior scientist and the senior scientist, as well as the entire editorial staff at that journal, which can certainly pay dividends when it comes time for you to be lead author on publications. So that's just one example, and there are many similar types of opportunities that you just need to make sure that you seek out, and then necessarily the second step, take advantage of it, because there's no shortage of opportunities out there. So I hear many times from either undergraduates, trainees, recent grads, that they would just love to go to an annual meeting and meet, distinguished bigwig Professor X or senior scientist Y. And the thing to remember is that you're not alone. So not only are other people at your same career stage saying the same thing, but this senior scholar also has their own colleagues and collaborators that they're also looking forward to catching up with at the annual meeting. So there's a lot of buzz going around the senior scholars. It's much easier to actually build a network from people who are at a similar life stage. They don't necessarily have to be the same, so you don't necessarily, if you're a master's level student or a PhD, you don't necessarily have to network with your same peers. You might also want to reach out to the cohort before you, but not too far different. So yes, it's great to establish with senior scholars and set up those networks and links. The other opportunity is to think about, okay, starting off at the ground level and then watching those branches grow. So I call this starting with your family tree. And this is your professional and research family tree. So your advisor seems like a logical place to start. And they have their own collaborative research networks, not only of people that they collaborate with on grants and scholastic opportunities and publications, but also their network of previous mentees and advisees. So take advantage of those networks. Now, 30% of you in the webinar pre-poll did mention that you intend to or do rely on your mentor very heavily to help you connect and introduce you to people, and that can be really good. It's really good to take advantage of that network, but it's not sufficient to just rely on that to happen. The other thing is to, again, not forget about your cohort and the cohorts before you. So if you're fortunate enough to be joining a graduate program or a lab or a postdoctoral program that has a sufficient bolus of other like-minded, likely trained, similar career stage folks, it behooves you to first network with what your resources are locally, so get to know them really well. They'll also be doing the same in their constellation, and then you can just start to see how these networks would really blossom. I was intrigued and certainly points to an area that we all need to do better in establishing those peer-to-peer networks. Again, I think most of us by default think about that networking really means I need to get to know the bigwigs in my field, and that's going to trickle down and help me out. And it is great to get to know those people and learn from their science, but it really is the folks that you are, quote-unquote, in the trenches with who are going up against the same kind of obstacles and dealing with the same kind of personal and professional issues as you are, that can really progress along with you so that you're all kind of growing as career professionals together, and can really be beneficial both in the short term and the long term in terms of networking. The other thing is I encourage you to think broadly about publications. So typically many of us will either invite our close colleagues, so here in the local area, local departments, local universities, to co-author publications with us. But in this day and age where so many of us communicate almost exclusively via email and technology, there's no reason. I would encourage you to think broadly about inviting others as co-authors who aren't necessarily in your home network. This is a real strategic way to, one, make them aware of what your science is and what you're doing in the field, and get you on their radar, and then also might help, again, keep you in their mind for if they did have a postdoctoral training opportunity, or if a professional position opens up at their institution that they think to give you a call or let you know. You can also do this if you don't necessarily want to and extend an authorship invitation. So if you have a manuscript that is getting ready for review or is in review and you just send it to someone, a colleague or a senior scholar in your field and say, I'd love to get your feedback on this. That's another great way, very low cost in terms of time on their part, but can really pay big dividends for you as a junior scholar. And then, of course, individual web pages, so trying to make sure and find out people's web presence through their own departmental web pages. But also, again, remember it's a two-way street. So web pages are only as good as long as they're up-to-date, relevant, and easily searchable. So if you have your own web page, it does require that you maintain that as well. So at this point, I want you to really start to think critically about who's in your network. We talked about the different parties that can make up what a network might be in terms of senior scholars, peers, other trainees, more junior level folks. But where are the gaps in your network? We all have them, but we just need to be conscious of them to make sure that we can capitalize and then start to go after folks to fill those niches. I would encourage you to think about a couple of domains and elements of your network when you start to take a critical look about how your network is working for you. And probably by far the most common sense approach is to be selective, right? So again, with that Facebook example, it's great if you have 200 friends on Facebook, but how many of those are actually enriching your life, giving back to you? In LinkedIn, you want to make sure that you're not just accepting invitations from people from the entire field of gerontology, but think about what are the behaviors I'm interested in, what are the populations that I'm interested in, what are the theoretical models I use that are similar to other folks. But it doesn't necessarily imply a narrow focus, but it is this balance in between quality and quantity. So you don't want to mass produce your LinkedIn account and just accept a slew of folks, but you do want to be strategic and really make sure that it's quality individuals who are not only going to be giving back in a scientific and professional way, but who you will be invested in to, again, continue to follow up on. You want to know what's going on. You want to know what they're publishing and clearly have some collateral to bring you as a professional. It's also important to think about that networks and people in your network can be multi-purpose and serve different functions. And so far I've been speaking almost exclusively about career and professional collaborations and networks, but it's important to remember that there are a lot of other facets of our lives and our professional development that also have to be cultivated in order for us to be successful. So the most logical one there is professional development. So I and other folks in my field here at Duke have professional development mentors. So these are individuals that aren't necessarily working in the same area as I am, but who are very well networked and well established, very effective at stepping back and helping me keep an orientation to the big picture view. So these are folks that you can go to get expert advice and sage wisdom and trusted counsel about your career stage. Where am I going from here? What's going to help me get here? They're not people that I meet with to talk about my science or my next grant proposal, but they're people that I help rely on to help me navigate political situations and again think about what my trajectory is and how I best get there. And then of course the career and scholastic. And here again is where having those peer-to-peer networks can really pay off because you can learn from each other, and then again as you all grow into early, mid, and senior stage researchers, you tend to keep that cohort with you. And I'll give an example of that here in a few slides. The other important thing to remember is that networks in and of themselves and should be dynamic. So none of us on this call, whether you're an undergraduate student, a master's or PhD, a postdoc, or a junior faculty, none of us expect that what I'm researching today is going to be the exact same thing that I'm researching 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I won't be the same person, the science won't be the same, the questions that remain in the field won't be the same, and I'm going to evolve as a person and a scientist over the next couple of decades. So it really makes a lot of sense, though, too, that your network should also change along with those changes. So again, the scope of the science, who you're networking with, the career stage as well, and again, what your needs are as a professional. And so your dynamics and your network should be changing as you change as a person and career individual. So I wanted to take an opportunity to kind of put this in a visual format my colleague Shannon Freeman up at the Canadian Association on Gerontology Student Association put this together for her to show her networks, and I really thought it did an excellent job of putting in a visual space what your networks can look like and how easily it is to have your networks kind of expand, fracture, and really start working for you. So this is me in the middle, and the most logical place to start is by establishing these collaborative and network relationships in your local space. So I'm here at Duke in the Durham VA, so clearly I reach out to colleagues. I started here as a postdoc, reaching out and taking part in the Postdoc Association, not only just in the Aging Center at Duke, but also across the university. So then I'm hanging out with folks from engineering, from medicine, from nursing, from psychology, from sociology. And it really enriches your experience by having those different perspectives and also learning about what their different trajectories are and strategies for being successful. And then taking advantage and trying to integrate yourself in institutions within your university or institution that are of direct relevance to your career and career trajectory. So I put those on there as well. Another nice, easy way to start navigating these kind of network collaborations is through national societies. So I've identified here kind of my three main professional societies: the Society of Behavioral Medicine, American College of Sports Medicine, and of course GSA. And through each of these, by regularly attending the meeting, taking advantage of volunteer and leadership opportunities, trying to embed myself in activities of those professional organizations, you can see that I've started to amass various leadership opportunities within those societies. So for the Society of Behavioral Medicine, for example, for the last 2 years I've served as a co-chair of the Military and Veterans Health Special Interest Group. This then gives me access and a platform to communicate with others who are also in the VA space doing behavioral research. You can also see I have that aging focus here in a society that's not necessarily aging focused. And again, getting access to both middle and senior career scientists and professionals in those various domains. You can also see that once you start to add collaborators at a national level, then you start to also add collaborations with other institutions and universities. So I've just listed here collaborators that I've either co-authored or started working with as a result of my interactions at an annual meeting for the ACSM. And then of course there's GSA, and as Joanna mentioned at the start of the call, I've been involved with ESPO for longer than I can remember. I got started really early as a master's student, as a BSS rep, and just continued to take advantage of all the opportunities that ESPO and GSA have granted. And that has enabled me to network really effectively and strongly with other graduates and emerging scholars within GSA across the U.S. and more recently has linked me to other national student organizations as well. So in the last 2 years or so, I really have seen a domain in my network constellation that I never really gave much attention to, but has really taken off, is really exciting and opened up some really unique doors. That's international collaborations and networks. So through my role at GSA as a chair of ESPO, that really helped me form a bridge with the International Association of Geriatrics and Gerontology, the IAGG, which is an international association of gerontology and geriatric societies. So GSA is a member of IAGG. And through my work there, I've assumed a leadership role, which has allowed me to serve on various committees, which again, when you think about every committee is made up of 5 to 10 people, that again adds some more people into your arsenal of networking opportunities. And from there, it's just branched out into identifying some professional networking collaborators. So in a nutshell, this is what my preliminary network looks like. It seems pretty impressive. It takes a lot of work to cultivate these and to continue to nourish them over the years. And some are more active than others depending on what's going on and what my priorities are in scientific demands. But I encourage you all to kind of think about what your network would look like. And again, are there specific domains that you think could really benefit from some greater attention? So once you've established these networks, I mentioned that it's, they're dynamic, you have to keep cultivating them, it's a lot of work, it's almost like a marriage, you have to continue to work at it over the years. It's not just going to maintain itself. So it's important to reflect on how networking can benefit you. And I mean the individual, what events do they tend to go to? Again, so kind of strategically identifying, okay, I have this group of people that I'm really interested in networking with, and actually it seems like most of them go to X annual meeting. Maybe I should consider broadening my attendance and going to this meeting next year. The other thing is to remember that to make this sustainable, you really have to count on your networks to work for you. So in that example I gave earlier, I don't necessarily expect myself to reach out to each of these individuals from those various committees. I don't necessarily expect to go to the GSA annual meeting and I introduce myself one-to-one to every single person I've identified as a potential fruitful collaboration. But I expect that when I walk around a poster session with my mentor or with my peers and they identify someone they've either worked with or are friends with, start to set up the expectation that they introduce you to these folks. If your institution has a social gathering or a networking event at an annual meeting, you should definitely be going, and if they don't have one, you should set one up. Same thing for your laboratory or your department at your institution. If you guys don't have social mixers and there's a critical mass of you at an annual meeting somewhere, try to arrange some sort of informal get-together where various generations of graduates and scholars can get together and meet. Also, do your homework, so make sure you've got some cogent, relevant questions to introduce yourself with. And I say this all the time, but introducing yourself poorly and poorly maintaining your networking networks can do just as much damage as not introducing yourself to someone. So you want to make sure that when you do start to make that initial contact, that it's informative, it's purposeful, and it's engaging. And to do that, you really need to set goals for your interaction. So what are you hoping to get out of this interaction? I remind you that it's not a good practice to say your goal for this first interaction is to get a job offer. You want to have these networks and relationships established well before that comes upon the table. So again, it really pays to be strategic. If you have a geographic location that you're interested in and eventually settling, start to reach out to professionals in that area now, so that when opportunities like this come up, you will be a natural person for them to pick up the phone and call. The next bullet is forget you are working, which is always easier said than done, right? I don't know many people who say they really look forward to networking, so I won't make that assumption here either. But do remember, and we've all had interactions that have been successful and unsuccessful, and the memorable ones in a positive way are those that just seem natural, right? So you let the conversation come organically. Perhaps you didn't even plan to network necessarily at all, but you were just being polite and introducing yourself to the person sitting next to you in a paper session. So really just trying to remember that it's social first and then informational and professional second. And then, of course, I won't spend too much time on this. Elevator speeches, I think we all know what those are. It's important. Again, you can do just as much damage when you're in an elevator with someone and they ask you what you do and you bumble over and you can't quite spit it out. You'll be memorable for a different reason, unfortunately, than what you had originally anticipated. So I was hoping to get Kelsey's help at this point to just take a quick poll of those of you on the call. I'm curious to see, have you prepared your 30-second elevator speech? And if you have you practiced it out loud? So we'll just give a few minutes for that data to pull in, please. Okay, let's see. So I can't quite see the responses, but I'm looking. Kelsey, it looks like the first and the third are the most popular. Do you mind reading those for me?
Correct. It looks like people who have prepared their elevator speech and practiced it out loud is an impressive 41%.
Wow.
And second is I have thought about it but have not practiced or prepared it at 38%. So only 9% have said they have not given much thought to their elevator speech at all.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that's astounding, and you guys are well ahead of the curve, and great preparation for the annual meeting coming up. So it is important to be able to coherently and succinctly summarize what you do and explain it to someone in 30 seconds or less. And again, to think about that it has to be across disciplines as well, and I know Jamie's going to speak more about that too, but if you haven't started thinking about it, I encourage you to do that, and then again, it's really important to practice. So as I mentioned before, you don't want to go into a networking opportunity just right off the bat asking for a job, asking them about openings in their graduate program. You want to set that groundwork at the beginning and well beforehand. And the easiest way to do that is to be present and be visible wherever you go, and business cards are an easy way to do that. 62% of you prior to this webinar mentioned that you have your own business cards, and that's great, and I encourage you to take them with you, always have them on hand, share them liberally, but I also caution you not to be a business card hoarder. So it's only effective if they don't get stuck in a pile on your desk when you come back from a meeting. So you know, I've had colleagues mention, you know, make notes on the back of your card about what you spoke with them with, about did you meet them in a poster session, what did you talk about, did you promise them anything, were you going to send them a paper? If you did, act on that. And then start cataloging these folks in an electronic database of some sort, so you're not collecting onto this cache of cards. And just as with LinkedIn, I encourage you to, it's important to follow up with purpose after these interactions as well. And please, please, please do not use this type of text, which I see all too often of, you know, dear Dr. Hall, you might not remember me, or you probably don't remember me, but we met at the meeting last week. That's really cutting yourself off at the knees. So really be purposeful, confident, proactive, and remind them again what you did speak about. You're following up as promised with this great seminal paper I just published that's going to change the field, and I wanted to make sure I followed up with you on that. And another great opportunity to do that is through GSA Connect. So I encourage you to check that out, and GSA has great platforms. So to wrap this up, I just wanted to provide a quick kind of personal anecdote of why we care about networking and why we don't necessarily always go for the senior scholar who's already surrounded by 5 other senior scholars at an annual meeting, and why it's important to reach out to the person sitting next to us. So I call this slide Coffee in 2011, Collaborators in 2016. And this details a collaborative and networking relationship that started in 2011 with my co-host, Jamie Hughes. So at the 2011 GSA Annual Meeting, we both happened to attend the Health Behavior Change Special Interest Group at GSA. We had not set eyes nor exchanged communications prior to this meeting. We happened to sit next to each other. It was a relatively small group. At the end, we had plenty of time for interactions, and Jamie and I just started talking to one another. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm chair of the ESPO organization at GSA. We have an opportunity to start a brand new webinar task force, which we're all enjoying now, and we needed someone to chair that right out of the gate to get it going. Bring in Jamie Hughes, who I knew was a tech-savvy individual interested in participating in ESPO and GSA. Fast forward another 2 years later to today, where Jamie is now chair-elect of the ESPO. I am now collaborating with her on a networking webinar, and we just recently submitted a symposium session together for the Society of Behavioral Medicine meeting, on which we're both lead authors. So it just goes to show that, you know, it pays to get to know the student next to you, because in 5 years you could be collaborating as senior scholars and researchers yourself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to someone who I think is the best networker that I've met in my career so far, Jamie Hughes, for tips for networking at the GSA Annual Meeting. All right, thank you, Catherine, for reminding us just why networking is so important and also sharing some really great tips of how we can go about getting started. In the second half of the webinar, I'll actually talk about some specific tips and opportunities for networking at this year's GSA Annual Meeting, which will be held in Orlando in November. So before I begin, we do have one more poll question for you, and that is, have you attended a GSA Annual Scientific Meeting in the past? So if you would, just take a second and answer this question as well.
And Jamie, this is Kelsey. It looks like we have 70% of attendees who have attended a GSA meeting in the past, and 24% of webinar attendees today have not, but they'll be attending in Orlando for the first time this year.
Great, thank you so much, Kelsey. So for those of you who have attended a meeting in the past, hopefully some of these strategies have worked for you in the past, and maybe you'll also get some new ideas. And for those of you who will be attending for the first time, the annual meeting can be great, but it can also be a really hectic time. So hopefully some of the suggestions that are shared today will help you balance your time most out of the meeting. So networking at the annual meeting. Let's talk a little bit sort of how to do that and how to get started. So ESPO is actually about 1,500 members strong. So that's 1/4 of GSA members. So with those kinds of numbers, it's easy to guess that ESPO members come from a wide range of career stages, and as a result, probably have a wide range of reasons and goals for networking at the annual meeting. So as Catherine mentioned, networking can be both formal and informal. It can be beneficial throughout your career and include informal opportunities to meet friends, colleagues, and also more formal opportunities for searching for academic programs, internships, fellowships, and permanent positions, the things we think about more with professional development and career development. The annual meeting is actually a true gift, and then the fact that many of gerontology's leading scholars will actually be in one place. So before you head to Orlando, think about what your own goals for networking are at the annual meeting. You might think about where you are in your career today, as well as where you're hoping to go in the next 2 to 5 years. It's never too early, as Catherine mentioned, to start thinking about where you want to go and connecting with individuals who can offer advice, support, or possibly an opportunity for collaboration, whether it's writing a manuscript, an opportunity to collaborate on a grant, postdoctoral fellowship, or even a permanent position. And GSA really has such a diverse membership that it's easy to gain a range of perspectives on different research and career trajectories and settings. We have folks who work in the private sector, in government sectors, traditional academic positions, as well as hybrid positions. So to this end, really think about who you want to talk to when you go to the annual meeting. And this might include different individuals for different reasons, and you might even find that it changes throughout the course while you're at the meeting. So I would suggest actually considering talking to a range of different GSA members. For instance, other emerging scholars and junior give you an idea of an institution's culture and what it's like to work or study at a particular place. Senior scholars, on the other hand, can provide advice around career and professional opportunities and development. So just as you might prepare your paper, poster, oral presentation, take time to prepare your networking strategies as well. First, start by doing a little identify what your own networking style and preferences might be. A lot of networking is really finding a balance between pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone
and really just sort of working to be honest, true self, and really just sort of being your own best advocate. So this is sort of being confident and relaxed at the same time. So it's good to be honest with yourself and really think about what you prefer and when and where you're most comfortable. Do you like planned encounters where you arrange a time to meet with an individual at the annual meeting? Are you okay with chance encounters, meeting someone maybe in a hotel lobby or even in the elevator? So think about those different opportunities and be prepared for all of them, because all of them will likely happen while you're at the annual meeting. So in terms of getting started with networking, a first great stop is using your immediate networks. So this can be fellow colleagues and scholars or your mentor. So as Catherine mentioned, many of you indicated in the pre-registration survey that you do rely on your mentor to introduce you to other scholars. So this is great, and this is an excellent strategy, but I'd also encourage you to work as your own advocate. Don't be shy about reaching out on your own, or think about what if your mentor has an unexpected meeting or encounter or isn't able to introduce you to that colleague or scholar that you really want to meet. Don't be shy about doing that on your own. So second, you've heard it 1,000 times, practice your elevator speech. Have it ready. So I tend to cringe at this thought and really don't like summarizing myself in a few brief sentences. But as Catherine mentioned, this is incredibly important, and a first impression can be a lasting impression. It's also important to think about, you'll come into contact with individuals and colleagues from outside of your discipline. So have a variety of different elevator speeches. Be flexible and be ready to talk to folks who might not be familiar with your research or your discipline. So it's a great idea as you're thinking about practicing that speech to also do it with friends and colleagues who are outside of your discipline. So third, depending on sort of your networking goals, have materials ready. Always have business cards ready. If you're presenting a poster, you might consider also having a handout of your poster you can take with you. You might also want a PDF copy of some of your slides. Think about what will work best for you. And finally, review the annual meeting program schedule. So know when individuals of interest are talking, know when they might be giving a poster, know when they might be doing a paper session. But be warned, just as Catherine mentioned, you're not the only one who wants to meet Professor Bigwig or Professor so-and-so. So be ready, be flexible, have a backup plan. That's okay if you don't meet everyone you want to meet at the annual meeting. What I would suggest is jotting down a few notes about their poster or their presentation. That will give you something to come back to when you try and make contact after the annual meeting, and will help you to have a little bit more of a personal connection. And I'd really just encourage you to relax. So every senior scholar has actually been in your shoes as well. They've been a student, a fellow, a junior scholar, and they know the challenges of navigating a career in gerontology firsthand. And they're actually humans too. So just be yourself. And as ESPO members, we're lucky to be members of a professional society that really values its emerging scholars and really does a lot to support us. So be sure to take advantage of all those opportunities. So some specific networking opportunities at the annual meeting. There really are a lot of opportunities, meaning there really is something for everyone and everyone's particular networking taste or preference. If you're someone who likes more planned encounters, consider drafting emails to folks that you're interested in talking with and set up a time to meet while you're at the annual meeting. There are also a variety of planned and sort of structured networking events at the meeting, including mentoring workshops, the GSA new member breakfast, and different evening receptions. And of course, scientific sessions can also be a great opportunity to connect with other individuals. So poster sessions can be a great time to catch someone, and as Catherine mentioned, have your questions ready. But don't let yourself get stressed out if you can't think of the great, one most impressive question. Sometimes a simple question like, tell me about your work, can really help get a conversation started on its own. I actually met my current mentor when I was walking through a poster session at off hours at another scientific meeting. So I had emailed her several months prior, not knowing that she had had a shift in her email accounts and didn't get my message. So I sort of thought, well, there's nothing to lose. I know who she is. I've heard from other folks and colleagues that she's a great person, a great researcher. So I simply went up to myself and introduced myself. And the rest really is history. And it's very likely that we'll continue to be collaborators for years to come. As again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, paper sessions can also be a nice time to meet other scholars. You might also think about connecting with fellow emerging scholars and attending some sessions together that are in your sort of shared areas of interest. And again, take notes. You'll hear a lot of information at the meeting. Jot down a few things to remind yourself of sort of what you thought, what really intrigued you about different individuals. Interest group meetings are a great opportunity to meet folks, as Catherine mentioned. I actually almost didn't go to that interest group that particular year. It was an evening session during dinner time. I had a long day. I had presented. I was tired, and I was hungry. I didn't really care to do any additional networking or talking. But I thought, you know what? I'm at the annual meeting. This is 1 week out of the year, and I'm just going to push myself to go. So I would encourage you, really take advantage of every opportunity. And finally, networking can actually happen in really unexpected places. So of course, yes, it does truly happen in the elevator. Have your elevator speech ready. You might be crammed in a conference hotel elevator with 10 other people. Don't be shy about introducing yourself just because there are other folks around. And it can also happen in other unexpected places. So don't feel like you need to be on at all times, but do think in the context of this year's meeting happening in Orlando, you never know who might be waiting in line behind you at Space Mountain or to ride the teacups. So always act professionally and in a way that you would want others to perceive you. And some ESPO-specific networking opportunities. So all of the events listed here, aside from the mentoring consultancies, are open to all ESPO members and do not require any advance registration. More detailed information is actually in this month's Gerontology News and will also be posted on ESPO Connect, as well as shared in the program book once you get to the annual meeting. So if you're looking to network with other ESPO members in a more relaxed environment, consider the ESPO Breakfast, ESPO Awards, or the International Task Force Coffee Hour. If you're looking to network with senior scholars, as well as some representatives from the National Institute on Aging, you won't want to miss our ESPO Awards. So we're actually changing the format quite a bit this year to place more emphasis on science, so think about a data blitz, and to also encourage more interactive networking, including some activities with NIA representatives. This year's ESPO Presidential Symposium will focus on tips for successful transitions across the career spectrum, including graduate students, postdoctoral scholars, and junior faculty. So there really will be something for everyone in that particular session. And if you're interested in connecting with other emerging scholars in your specific discipline, consider attending one of the 4 ESPO section symposia. And finally, the ESPO Lounge is a great place to relax, check your email, get a snack, and connect informally with other ESPO members. So in closing, what happens after the annual meeting? As Catherine mentioned, stick to your plan to follow up. Don't let the annual meeting be both the beginning and the end of your networking efforts. Follow up with individuals you meet at the meeting, and this can be done through email, phone, or social media. So use those notes to sort of jog your memory of what you talked about and different reasons for connecting with different folks. Getting involved in ESPO, as Catherine mentioned, can be a great opportunity to network with both other emerging scholars and senior scholars as well. So there are several committees which you can join at any time throughout the year. Or if you're interested in a volunteer ESPO council position, you want to be on the lookout for our call for nominations coming out in the spring. And finally, as the incoming ESPO chair, I want to assure you that ESPO is committed to supporting its members year-round. So this includes activities like these webinars, as well as opportunities for formal and informal mentoring throughout the year. So really let us hear from you. What do you as ESPO members want to see offered? And really, what would help you network and grow as an emerging professional? ESPO Council always wants to hear from you, and we really encourage you to reach out to us by emailing us at espo@geron.org. So in the meantime, Catherine and I are happy to entertain your questions, and just want to thank you for joining today's event and joining us on this webinar. So as a reminder, you are able to type your questions into the chat box at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we will now open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you both for your presentations and for this really useful information as we start preparing for going into the meeting. I have a few questions here. One individual asks, how do you recommend reaching out to someone on the internet if you do not have any prior connection to them?
So this is Catherine. I'll just talk about kind of general recommendations and then personal experience. It really is just finding some commonality, whether that is the field that you're in. Do you have a similar population of interest? So we're all interested in aging, but is there an outcome, whether it's physical function or sleep or prescription medication adherence? Find some sort of commonality that you could start the conversation off. Again, if you have a new publication that's coming out, or if they have recently published something that's caught your attention, ask them a question about that, or just share your science with them. And also, again, the annual meeting gives you a great excuse to reach out to people, because you could ask, are you going to the annual meeting? It'd be great to touch base with you in person.
As a follow-up to that question, if you don't hear back after, say, emailing them, what sort of course of action should you take? Do you recommend, re-emailing them, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind re-emailing, and again, to say I understand it probably got lost in your inbox, which is quite likely. But also then check out some other avenues. So maybe email is not the best way. Maybe you need to get on LinkedIn or ResearchGate and track them down through there. The GSA Connect is a great way to kind of get to people as well, because you know they're active members. So that will be filtered directly into their inbox that's registered. So I would encourage you to be flexible and not rely just on one platform if you're not getting responses.
Great, thank you. Another attendee asks, should you provide your business card from your current job?
So this is Jamie. I'll speak to that question a little bit. I think there can be some different scenarios. So one, sometimes we all are in situations of maybe we need to relocate for family reasons, or maybe we're looking for more professional development and growth. So maybe that, maybe that search isn't out in the open, and we would feel a little bit uncomfortable about providing our current business card. But I think at the end of the day, whatever sort of avenue you're going towards, or why you're networking, whether it be for an academic program, to seek admission to that program, to look for a job, wherever you're going and wherever you're headed, those individuals will want to hear from your colleagues and your supervisors from your current job. So to that end, I don't see any problems with providing the business card from your current job. But of course, you want to be honest. I know it can be tricky when we're sort of in the early phases of our career, and maybe we're changing positions or funding sources quite a bit. We know that I guess about 2/3 of folks mentioned that they do have business cards. So for those of you who don't, I would really encourage you to consider getting some printed. A lot of universities offer graduate students even a template as well as discounted prices on printing business cards. You can also use sites like Vistaprint to print some very professional looking cards at a very reasonable price with a very quick turnaround. And if you're thinking about, you know, printing business cards and you know that you're going to be in a high sort of transition time, maybe you leave your title very simple. Maybe use a personal email address and personal phone number that you know will not change in coming years. So you don't have to worry about getting cards reprinted, and you also know that individuals will be able to find you should you need to make a sudden change.
Yeah, and I would follow up on Jamie's comment by emphasizing that it's really not ideal to be handing out business cards that have you scratching out information that has changed. So I know you can probably print 200 or so business cards in a fell swoop, but if you know you're not going to be a master's student next year, then maybe only print 50 and then reprint. Or I love Jamie's suggestion of just keeping it general so that you can use them for years to come. But it really is worthwhile investment to make sure that your business cards are up to date because that really is your calling card. And as I mentioned, sharing it liberally, you know, she mentioned printing off PDFs of your poster. Well, why not staple your business card to that poster PDF so I don't have to try to find you online by myself. I know what your email is. I know what your web page is. So that really is one of the cheapest way to market yourself.
Great, thank you. Those are the questions that we had from our audience, and we are at the end of the webinar. So on behalf of the ESPO Webinar Task Force, I'd like to thank our speakers again for their excellent presentation, and I'd also like to thank our audience for their attendance and participation. So for audience members, upon leaving the webinar, you'll be sent a survey for this and future webinars. Please take the time to provide information on how we can tailor future webinars to your needs as ESPO members. Once again, thank you and have a great day.